Today marks the end of Corrections Week, aimed at celebrating excellence. And the Constitution obliges government to provide adequate nutrition, medical treatment, and reading material to all prisoners, among other things. But how effective is the Department of Justice and Correctional Services in providing these rights? Good evening and welcome to Interface. My name is Rams Mabote. Our guest tonight is Manelisi Wolela, the spokesperson for Correctional Services. But before we get into our discussion, let's have a look at this report produced by Rosalia Whitehead.
The Department of Correctional Services aims to use Corrections Week to recognize and celebrate pockets of excellence. The department says it's committed to reintegrating offenders into their communities and use the social reintegration program to heal victims of crime. 16 parolees completed a course and qualified as firefighters. This brings the number of parolees who have completed the course since 2009 to 76. In its 2013-2014 annual report, the department indicates that its social integration program is not doing as well as it should. Recently, inmates from Cape Town's Pollsmoor prison were evacuated following the death of at least one prisoner who died from a disease related to rat infestation. The National Institute for Communicable Diseases says overcrowding, inadequate waste management and blocked drains contributed to the rat infestation. Pollsmoor prison was built to hold 4,000 inmates, but it was overcrowded by more than 250%. In April, Constitutional Court Judge Edwin Cameron compiled a report for the Constitutional Court. It details how Pollsmoor Prison has failed to comply with the standards of the country's Bill of Rights and the Correctional Services Act. Activists say conditions at Pollsmoor Prison mirror the inhumane conditions in South African prisons. But the Department of Correctional Services denies this, saying this view is myopic.
In South African society, there's also very little sympathy for prisoners, and we notice that in our work, because when we've written about prison conditions in Pollsmoor, in Johannesburg, in Bloemfontein prisons. If you look at the comments, people will say, what's the problem? These people are criminals, you know, like they deserve to die, basically.
Former inmate Bongani, not his real name, was sentenced to 18 years for an armed robbery he committed in 2005. Sentenced in 2006, he served 6 years at the Johannesburg Correctional Services, also known as Sun City.
Guys were sleeping in the passage. You see, when there's a bed, there's another bed here. There's a space in between.
Yeah.
So guys slept here and here.
Wherever there's a space.
Where there's a space, they were sleeping somebody. Even here, where they are supposed to go to toilet, they were sleeping there. So when you are going to toilet, you have to go like on top of the beds.
Here, he was encouraged to further his studies and has tutored inmates who were studying for grade 10 and 11. Those who studied stayed in single cells, yet few took advantage of the opportunity.
Doesn't see the point. I love education, so I will go very to education. But considering my age, no private company can hire me.
After serving a third of his sentence, Bongani was transferred to Boksburg prison. Again, no sanitation, and the prison was never cleaned. He missed the daily motivation he received at the Johannesburg Correctional Services. He's been out on parole since last year. With a grade 12 and diplomas in computer studies, business and marketing, Bongani still can't find a job because of his criminal record. Rosalia Whitehead, Interface, Johannesburg.
Welcome back. Our guest tonight is Deputy Commissioner Manelisi Wolela, spokesperson for Correctional Services, Mhlekazi Molo, and good evening.
Good evening. Thank you for the opportunity.
Very contradictory picture. Glory on the one side, excellent work, people getting education, but then on the other side, we're getting all these complaints. Corrections Week, are we doing fine?
I think, first of all, I think it's important for us to understand where we're coming from. For example, we're coming from a regime in South Africa where the rights of people were not respected. People were warehoused in correctional facilities, which were not designed at all for advancing rehabilitation. And we're talking about 240-something facilities that are in the country. To turn around that situation, I think one of the leaders once said, it's like turning around a huge, massive ship. It moves slowly to turn around. But that's why it is important for people, when we're reflecting on pockets of excellence that we have done, we've achieved. For example, during the Corrections Week, we're demonstrating that this is the kind of progress that has been made over time, but there's still a long way to go to achieve our ideals, which are outlined in the Constitution, in the policy of correctional services, the legislative framework, as well as in the white paper on corrections.
But by and large, is the ship turning?
We are indeed turning. Let me just cite a few things. One is that victim participation was almost non-existent before. But over the last 6 years, we've made a phenomenal improvement, which is more than 2,000% improvement in terms of participation of victims in the processing of parole. We're talking about 10 years ago, we were sitting at 187,000 offenders in our facilities. Consistently working with our partners within the criminal justice system, we are sitting now at 158,000 offenders, which is about 30,000 reduction. So we have reduced overcrowding from about 60-something% to about 29% as we stand now, because our official accommodation is now sitting at 119,000 in correctional services. In terms of even security, in 1995, we had an escape rate per annum of 1,244. We have reduced that to about 53 escapes in a year. Of course, we recognize that any escape is one escape too much, but please, when we are critically looking at correctional services, we need to look at it in context.
When the clip was playing and somebody spoke about how they would have studied but they don't get employment, you shook your head and you said he's misunderstanding this. And actually, when we asked our viewers about the show tonight, people talked to us about the fact that they had been trained. Somebody told us about a brother who got IT education after 25 years in prison. But they got out and they could not be employable. Does it help?
Look, first of all, you are saying the conditions are not enabling for people to study. We're doing our best to create those conditions. One is that over the last 6 years, we've improved full-time schools from 1 to 14. We have improved access to technical education, which is going to give you skills which are greatly needed by the industry outside to address the skills mismatch in South Africa. There's so many posts that are available, but people do not have the necessary technical skills to do that. Over 10,000 over the same period have been trained in technical skills, plumbing, this and that, electrical engineering, you name them. When you get skilled in those areas, when you get out, you create jobs rather than looking for jobs. Mm-hmm. But be that as it may, we acknowledge that there's still serious challenges in terms of people having criminal record and finding it difficult to study. Just to mention, during the Corrections Week, we had 215 graduating in Gauteng. We had a function at LUCOP, 215 graduating in Gauteng alone, post-matric qualifications. Because of our partnership with the University of South Africa, with further education and training colleges, and technical schools, and you name
But
them.
aren't those efforts wasted? And I'm going to ask you, because I don't think it's necessarily your fault.
Point, yeah.
I'll tell you this. It would seem that South Africa, outside presence, South Africa is not ready to accept these rehabilitated people with new education, with new skills, and to give them a chance. So aren't your efforts, don't you feel at some point that you're probably not getting any far with your efforts?
The pace of change is indeed not acceptable. But I think we need to appreciate that victims of South Africa, a lot of them remain unemployed outside. You know the unemployment rate in the country. Mm-hmm. And therefore, the criminal record of you complicates that situation further. But our leadership, the Minister of Correctional Services, Advocate Michael Masuta, has indicated during the budget vote speech that definitely this 6-year regime of the criminal records management in South Africa requires a review. As a result, he has made an undertaking that during this financial year, we're going to open a national dialogue. Remember, it's not just correctional services, it's everybody else who plays a role. Open a national dialogue on the management of criminal records. So we're expecting that there will be significant improvements that are made in that regard. But while that process is still underway, because it's going to lead to legislative changes and going forward, while that is still underway, we are building a series of partnerships which are helping to absorb a lot of ex-offenders. Some are getting land. For example, one ex-offender who participated in Deputy Minister's National Conference of Ex-Offenders was demonstrating, showcasing there that he has employed tens of parolees because he was given land. He's producing green pepper, yellow pepper, and all these raspberries, etc. And he's supplying main retail stores. But of course, we can't mention their names now because maybe they may end up being compromised, you know. But what is happening is that they're using the skills gained inside. They're producing food outside, and they're supplying main chain stores in South Africa.
There are other concerns, and we've received letters from other prisoners, but we need to take a break. So when I come back from you and to you, I'm going to ask you about those concerns.
Okay.
Please don't move. We'll come back and talk more to Mr. Olela.
Looking for social issues?
It is not our intention to give condoms to 10-year-old children.
We're here to assist you. Looking for religious issues?
The point is not for the church to try and prove whether this is the fact.
So we want accountability. Is there a system of governance in your churches?
Political issues.
Barack Obama said Africa should stop looking to the outside for salvation and focus on someone else being at fault for the problems of the continent.
Economic issues.
The young mothers, single mothers, that's buying property now.
Or just looking to air your views.
Here are some of your views on social media.
Look no further, as Newsroom has all the informative information you need. Weekdays at 9 a.m. only on the SABC News channel.
Health Talk, your show on health practice.
The people being empowered with knowledge so that they can change their behavior and reduce their risk of being sick.
How serious is stress at work?
If we don't address workplace stress, that negative stress, then it can lead to burnout and it can lead to depression.
How does absentees affect companies?
The one that's really problematic for employers is the one that is unscheduled.
How can companies organize their wellness program?
Health promotion mustn't just be a one-size-fits-all type of approach. It must be customized based on understanding of the unique needs of that particular organization.
For health tips that will help you to adopt healthy living with Dr. Sello Mutawung on Health Talk every Saturday.
Welcome back. Our guest tonight is Deputy Commissioner Manelisi Olela, spokesperson for the Correctional Services Department. We received a letter here from 3 prisoners at the Khosi Mampuru, the 2nd Correctional Center. And I'm going to mention their names with the hope that they won't be victimized. David Paladi, Emmanuel Manchidi, and Bakam Masejo. They start humbly saying that, they have no right to complain. They know that they're prisoners. But they worry about the services that they get and how they could be detrimental. In one instance, they mentioned a prisoner who had a terrible heart, who was going through terrible pain on his chest and asked to be taken to a clinic. And the warder, whose name they mentioned, but I don't think I should mention, said, you go back to sleep. You have no right to go to the clinic. And I can mention, this affidavit is about 18 pages long. They mention a number of instances. And these things are what people would say, but why tell us about this success when these things are happening, when your own warders are not recognizing the same rights that are guaranteed by this constitution?
The policy is very clear. And actually, let me mention that in the last financial year, there are over 120 officials who have been put through disciplinary processes and were dismissed in that institution. Dismissed for various things. Dismissed, some of them, about 11 or 12 of them were dismissed for smuggling contraband into our facilities. Some were dismissed because of the manner in which they have treated offenders, and with evidence that has been brought forward, they got put through disciplinary process and they were dismissed. So the point that I'm saying is that we need to understand that in context again, that we have 42,000 officials in that department. If you have about 100 or 120 that deviate or have deviant behavior, and we deal with them, we've demonstrated very clearly. For example, if you look at the total annual assessment that is being done by DBSA in terms of departments that are effectively implementing what is called a minimum anti-corruption capacity that is working in government, Correctional Services is sitting as number 3 in this country in terms of performance in dealing with fraud, corruption, and ethical behavior. So I'm saying Correctional Services is represented by the majority of right officials that are an example of what we need to create. Ideal correctional official. But there are some that behave in a manner that is unacceptable, and without any doubt, we deal with those ones.
Yet, of course, we get other comments from other people who say, but prisoners have absolutely no right to complain. They did wrong to society. Why should they be complaining and expecting 5-star treatment? In fact, somebody also wrote that we spend more on a prisoner per day when we've got a lot of people who are poor. So who are they to complain?
You know, one of our leaders once responded this way, and he said, you know, in a war situation, in terms of international conventions, you capture these. Remember, some of your soldiers have died. Then you capture soldiers of the opposite force. You know, immediately you capture them, you keep them in your barracks, in your cells. The international conventions are applicable. The minimum standards have got to be. Now they are sitting there, they're getting 3 meals a day. But what is happening to your soldiers? They are in the bundus, they have no access to breakfast, etc. They have some things here, chocolates and other high concentrate energy food, which they have to preserve for days sometimes without being able to come and get any decent breakfast. Now the issue is, as a society, the cost of curing problems, the cost of correction is multiple times higher than intervening at the early stage as families, as community, to prevent crime. It is in the hands of all South Africans to make it a point that we reduce the levels of crime, we reduce the levels of serious crimes in the country, and in that way, we will invariably impact on the kind of investment or money that is spent by this nation to keep 158,000 prisoners inside, correct offenders inside our facilities.
Does that pacify somebody who says, but you're spending money? I drive down the streets, I see people begging every day, honest women with their children trying to have a life. Would that make me feel better, what you just told me?
Okay, maybe that was a little bit from a negative side of this thing, but what I wanted to emphasize is that it's a collective responsibility to reverse that kind of situation. Number 2 is that we have an obligation in terms of the legislation, constitution, policy which has been passed by the people of this country. Our responsibility is to implement the law, implement the constitution. But besides that, research has demonstrated that those people that have committed the worst crimes in this country, most of them have nothing to lose, have very low self-esteem. Those that are responsible for rape and all those things have very low self-esteem. So the crime that has been committed by those people before they were brought to us, there's nothing we can do about it except to work on changing this offender to protect the next victim. Because remember, there's a possibility that they can come into us and they can learn more criminal behavior and they will go back and maim more people in this country. So our obligation is to make it a point that we intervene and help break the cycle of crime and rechannel these people, take them out of the vicious cycle of poverty, underdevelopment, low self-esteem, and all those issues, so that when they go out, there are lesser chances of them committing crime again. So it is in the interest of every citizen of this country what we're doing, rehabilitation.
Let's talk overcrowding. In one of your prisons, Paulsmoor, in the Western Cape, and Paulsmoor is a very significant prison. It housed our first president. You know, it's supposed to hold 4,000 inmates and is overcrowded by more than 250%. That can be conducive to correction, to rehabilitation.
For sure.
And I'm sure it's just a microcosm. I'm sure I could find out about more other prisons that are overcrowded.
Correct, correct. We have 243 facilities in the country. A significant portion of them is not overcrowded at all, including the PPP projects or the PPP correctional centers. Besides that, you might find that it's probably about 15 to 20% of our facilities that are overcrowded by over 200%. And factors in that regard are beyond our control. For example, if we're looking at Portsmouth, remember I said at the beginning that we had reduced a number of inmates from 187,000 to 158. We also, within 12 years, we reduced the numbers of awaiting trial detainees from about 64,000. We're sitting now at about 40,000, which is a significant reduction. But when it comes to Portsmouth's awaiting trial section is backing the national trend in the sense that because that facility is serving about 18 courts in the metro and the centrality of that facility, it puts phenomenal amount of pressure in terms of managing ins and outs of inmates in that facility. But what is happening is that discussions are underway right now with the Department of Public Works for purposes of providing extended capacity in that
Are there discussions with the Department of Justice to also fast-track the trials so that we don't have awaiting prisoners in so many numbers for such a long time?
Exactly. That's what we're working on. For example, even now, the management of dealing with that problem that we're experiencing, of moving those offenders out to the adjacent facilities and other facilities so that we can fumigate and kill those rats and make it a point that for a long time we don't experience what we're experiencing. We're working together with criminal justice partners.
We're going to take another break. When we return, we conclude our conversation with Mr. Wolela.
Welcome to Network, a technology news program that also discusses what's trending in social media in and around Africa. MTN has launched its new movie and television streaming service, Front Row. If it's trending, we will find it. That's Network with me, Spumela Lezondi, every Sunday at 7:30 p.m. only on the SABC News Channel.
Let's explore our conversation further with our guest, by the way, who is Manelisi Wolela from the Department of Correctional Services. I want us to not paint a picture of failure because it is not a true picture. It is not total failure. Some of the things that we know from you is that 57.8% of offenders have participated in educational programs. 2.7 in FET mainstream education. There's 94% of our parolees are without violations. HIV program is doing well. 96% of inmates are on ART medication and stuff like that. So there are successes.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Other successes, for example, if you look at our correctional facilities, our TB cure rate is sitting at 83%. Our national country TB cure rate is sitting probably between 73% and 76%. So, relative, we're doing very well. But it's an obligation to do that because we need to change these personalities. We need to change these people for the better. Other issues which we need to highlight, for example, which we're celebrating during the week, is that the participation of victims, which is championed by Minister Advocate Michael Masuta, is central to what we do. For example, during the Corrections Week, we had 3 events that were focusing on promoting the centrality of victims. We had a victim offender dialogue in Mbizana in the Eastern Cape. We had a victim empowerment program which was run in Bethel during the Corrections Week. And even on the last day of the Corrections Week in the Western Cape, we handed over a house that has been rebuilt by offenders to an old lady who was 92 years. And after that, we had an imbizo with communities of Mbekweni and Pal in the Western Cape. The focus there was about victims and communities participating, being mainstreamed in the activities that we undertake. Other than that, we're making significant improvements in terms of access to agricultural production. We're producing 100% and more of the consumption of pork inside our facilities. We're making tons and tons of vegetables. We are moving slowly towards self-sufficiency. And that self-sufficiency doesn't go alone. It goes hand in hand with the provision of skills to our people. But remember, one of the biggest challenges we're facing in this country is food security.
As a matter of interest, these prisoners, do they earn part of the money they make for you when they produce all these things?
Exactly. Okay. Exactly, a lot of them. I'm talking about houses. There are hundreds of houses that are built by them for victims outside as part of reparation, as part of saying sorry to communities. Besides that, they are producing inside. But of course, there are certain categories which we can't take to the fields because the security categories determine whether we're going to take people to outside spends.
Children, how are we doing on that part? Are children getting lesser and lesser children in correction services, and are they getting rehabilitated quicker to get out of the system?
Absolutely. For example, about 5 or more years ago, we had about 1,700 awaiting trial children in our facilities. Today, we are sitting at less than 200 children. I think could be about 140-something children that are in our facilities. That is a product of the execution of the Child Justice Act, working hand in hand with all our partners within the criminal justice system. That is phenomenal. And therefore, someone who comes with a perception or looks at one instance and blows it out of proportion. That's why we're saying you need to get the macro picture to be able to make sense of what is going on in correctional services.
But the small picture is not irrelevant either.
I understand we treat it as serious because even that small bad picture, it's very important for us to address that issue. But it's important for people when they're evaluating us because they're going to create opinions and they're going to develop confidence and trust in this system. It's your correctional system. Make it work.
In 365 days, we're celebrating Prisons Week again. I hope we talk a different story next year.
For sure. Thank you.
Deputy Commissioner Maneli Siwolela, thank you very much for your time. Thank you for watching Interface. That's how we end our program this week. From me, Rems Mabote, and the team, goodbye and God bless.